attention to detail, uniqueness, fearlessness, and more than anything else, being willing to show up on time to do gigs. In New York, it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, I've been on more than 450 albums as a drummer. I've produced a lot of albums as well. I've probably done, 10,000 shows in my life between tours and this and that. And the truth is that in New York, there is so much pressure and stress on you because if you screw up, there's 100 other guys right behind you waiting to take advantage of that opportunity. So your level has always to be high, but it's also your understanding of the situation and what it is that you bring to the situation and what you have to do. One of the first things you have to do is show up. And if you show up on time, so there are a lot of days where I would have 3 gigs in the day. I probably do a rehearsal from like 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Then I do a session from about 3 to 6 p.m. And then I might have 1 or 2 gigs at night from 7 to 8 or from 7 to 10, and then another one sometimes super late at night at the bitter end, which was awesome because it was a fusion gig and you could do freaking anything you wanted. It was crazy, crazy, crazy music. But that's your day. And getting around New York is a pain in the ass. Running around with gear is a pain in the ass. So that's why those who are on time and find their way to all these gigs and do what they're supposed to do, they get all the work. And that's what I did for years and years and years. I play less now. I produce more, but I do a lot more playing in studios and a lot more recording in a way than I used to before. I do about 25 to 35 albums worth of playing every year, in between all the other productions and all the other stuff. But to be a great drummer, you got to make sure that you're not like every other drummer and make people aware of what you do. There is no formula to music. It's actually one of the beautiful things, at least from my perspective. One of the beautiful things about being in the arts and being in the musical creative arts is that things are changing all the time. And you can see that, for example, just recently with Billie Eilish, right? All the Grammys that she won, the song structures are not typical song structures, the tonalities are not typical tonalities, the heavy uses of very low frequencies are completely and totally against anything else that has been popular in the last while. And yet, it's undeniable what the artistry is. It's undeniable the business relationships that found interest in it and were grown because of it. And so, to become successful, to gain a Grammy, to find that specialness in a hit recording is mostly about abandoning, I think, formulas. So you must abandon formulas and you must understand yourself better than anybody else. Because everybody has starting points, everybody has themes that they build out, and everybody has repeating patterns. How do you break repeating patterns? You have to go and change your thinking. You have to read, you have to go to museums, you have to ask questions, you have to not fear criticism, you have to be very truthy with yourself. The best thing anybody can do is tell you when your stuff is shit. It's the most valuable help somebody can give you, because then you know you're not going down the right pathway. Bieber is a perfect example of this, right? Being that I'm Canadian also, and Justin Bieber, woo, the Biebs. Justin Bieber became, it was basically the first YouTube sensation. And why did he become a YouTube sensation? Very few people know this. He used to go around in Toronto, that's where he's from. He used to go around all the radio stations. And he would ask the radio DJs, he'd bring them new songs, and he'd say, listen, it's a new song I wrote, what do you think? He asked people directly in the middle of the industry, directly who were dealing with music daily for hours, what they thought of what he played. And they would give him advice, and he would continue and continue to work on it. In the meantime, because YouTube was very young at that time, he would play covers, which, by the way, don't ever do anymore if you want to get noticed on this planet in terms of YouTube, thinking this idea that you play a cover and that the big artist is, suddenly the cover version is going to pop up and somebody's going to see you and then they're going to listen to other music. That's a fantasy. Don't let anybody ever tell you that that's true. That was true 15, 20 years ago. That is not true now. He went to professionals, guys who work in the industry but aren't in competition with him, but need what he does, and asked them true questions. And they gave him true answers. And he built off of that. He didn't let it hurt his ego. He let it help his growth. So it's a hard question to answer because there's so many central features to writing a hit song. Most of those are not about formulas. You will learn in books about formulas, you will learn about structures, you will learn about A440, and you can go historically and talk about the Nazis developing A440 as a way to standardize and energize their political goals. A440 is not a natural feeling reality, 436 is. But all these things are informational nuggets that you know, that you eat and you consume, but they're not truths. The truth comes from you. That's how you write a hit song. You have to explain, you have to describe, you have to share the truth. And nobody's truth is the same as anybody else's truth. But it's hard to do that. You have to be kind of a little fragile also. There's tremendous differences. We're coming back now into something that I'm really happy about. And you feel within recordings in general a much greater mid-range and low-frequency richness that had been very absent for me for much too long. Now, I'm a drummer. That's my main axe, which means, jokingly we say the drummer and the bass player need to be sleeping together in order to make a great song. I like the bottom. I like the thickness of the bottom and that sound. But for many years, the compression strategies that have been applied by iTunes, that had been applied by mastering engineers, until the mastering for iTunes structure came into being, which is very smart, because the world of online has a lot of peculiar artifacts in it, and as a result, the way that music sounds isn't the way that it's produced. There are multiple steps that you go through. The more bottom you have, the happier a man I am. So if you want to talk about that, there was a lot of bottom at a certain period of time in music, mostly because of technological limitations. Soundboards, so mixing consoles used to have high pass and low passes in them where the edges were gone. So there's no such thing as a 20 or 30 hertz really in the mixes. There was no such thing as anything above 16K, but that's also because speakers couldn't handle it. The speaker technology at the time couldn't replicate it well enough. Today, with Pro Tools, you're basically playing a game from 0 to infinity. Now, unless you have the hearing at the level of a dog, you're not going to be able to hear within upper frequencies the lower frequencies. So you need to carve out space. This is a renewal towards this, and it's like anything that moves in ebb and flow. You now have technology that can help you with it, but I'm the first person to tell you, if you put something down at 10 hertz, you're nuts. Nobody on this planet is going to care or hear it. 20 hertz is where everything starts. Actually, 20 hertz is where the magic happens. But I'll leave that for the, we all have our little tricks and things that we do when we produce. So 20 hertz, by the way, is where the magic happens. That's the last thing. So in No One, there are actually multiple people that did multiple things. What No One was a very peculiar experience. It actually is not what one would call a normal experience. I was called in by another fellow, a guy who I'd worked with on many other projects, a guy named Carey Brothers, Q. And Q had done a lot of work with Alicia. But Alicia was at a point in her career where she was getting very tired, physically, emotionally. It's after she had become quite famous, and the demands were huge on her. So right before she basically disappeared off the face of the earth for about a year and a half, I was with Q in the studio, and we were working on some of her tracks. I did a whole bunch of tracks with her. One of them was No One. And the whole session took 3 hours. It was not there was not a lot of drama in it because most of it had been pre-written. All that was required was a kind of a drum vibe and pulse that moved everything forward. And so we know, and drummers know this, if you listen to what I play on No One, it is, without a doubt, probably the first thing that every drummer in this building would have learned to play on the drums when they sat on the drums, or what a baby sitting on the drums would try to play. The difference is when you spend a lot of time developing it, it has an ebb and a flow. It has a vibe. And so getting that vibe, getting that pocket to feel the way it did was actually what the challenge was with that particular song. So I had worked with an artist named Jason Udoff and the New Hotness. They were sort of like a Jamiroquai style. And so I'd worked with them. I worked with a band called Project Grand Slam, which had a lot of synchronizations used with the music, and that's what really made them popular, and they were on radio too. So they got nominated for Grammys as well. So I had a really good time that year, but I didn't even know that her stuff was nominated. I didn't even know the song was out. So I'm driving in Victoria, Canada, where I have a studio. I'm driving my car, I turn the radio on, I'm like, that's my symbol. I recognized it immediately. I'm like, wait, this is a thing we did 3 years ago. I'm like, what? So immediately I phoned Q and said, dude, what's going on? He's like, right. So this came out, and it's nominated for 3 Grammys. I'm like, amazing. And so I was nominated for Producer of the Year that year, but I was basically, I wasn't expecting to win anything because the guys who are against me are, you know, monuments of the industry, and I'm just one blonde crazy guy from New York. And it was an amazing experience, and I was extremely happy that she won those Grammys. That song, by the way, is one of the few songs that has more than 40 billion spins on the planet. And it's funny because I walk into a Zara, I walk into a cafe, and it's constantly still playing. And that song now is quite old. It's more than 10 years old, but it still has all the energy. It's a great performance by Alicia on it, and yeah. Business. The music business is an evolving thing. So like any, we have the expression, right? Evolve or die. You can't assume that just the art evolves or dies. The business also evolves or dies. And boy, the evolutions that exist right now in the music business, I mean, I'm going to go upstairs and share with them some crazy thoughts and ideas about why music is what it is, why the business exists as it does, the fundamental truths. These are very important. And they're very important because when you're an artist, your primary job is to make art. But what does making art do for you if all you do is make great art and you're in your basement and nobody hears or cares about it? That is not what you want for yourself. You want to become independent. You want to have a quality of life. I think every artist is, as if they invest the years, they should be thought of in the same way you think of a doctor. We're a doctor for the ears. A doctor is somebody who studies and works and evolves and trains and becomes better and better at what they do and learns from other specialists, tests what they can and can't do, asks questions. Sometimes they fail, they have to redo things, and eventually they find their way to a place where people trust them and they go to them to fulfill their health requirements. It's exactly the same thing with music. I value musicians in dollars as a lifestyle, the same I value a doctor. It's the same amount of years. Sometimes it's more. I jokingly say that, I've made a lot of money in the industry, thank God. But if I really look and I break it down to all the hours that I've put into being a musician, from when I started, from all the practicing, from all the tougher gigs I've done, for all the everything, I'm jokingly saying I'm probably still making $5 an hour. And I say that because it's my love that brought me to the point of wanting to do this, not my business sense. My business sense followed, and I had to start to understand that getting paid for what you do in music it's both a privilege, but it's also a right. And understanding how to make sure that the rights side of it is protected is very important. Understanding the privilege side of it means you're always studying, you're always growing. Those are two things that have to work hand in hand. If you try to supersede one over the other, invariably you're going to fail. So you need both. And I would say, music, okay, of course, you're going to go study an instrument, you're going to go better at it, you're going to go study DAWs and different plugins and strategies and this and so on, and compression functions and all that. You're going to have to learn all that. But that's just you sitting on your computer experimenting. What you can't do that with is business. Business, you need to get in together with other people. You need to ask questions. You need to make mistakes. Do you all know how to read a contract? Do you know what's supposed to be in a contract and not supposed to be in a contract? Why do these things exist in a contract? Who does it protect? Who does it not? And that's as simple as when you go rent an apartment. If your apartment is going to be where you give birth to music, because most people sit on their laptop with their DAW, probably have some kind of stupid microphone, and they're sitting on their bed making music, your apartment is a facilitator for your music making. So you better feel secure in that environment when you do that. Business is super important. It's not everything in music, thank God, but it can cost you a lot of opportunities and understanding if you don't spend time in business. So this is what I've been doing. I teach also out of the Collective in New York City, and what I do is I teach drums privately, I teach production, but for me the most important class that I offer is in business, and by extension, business ethics. Because understanding the future of how the music industry is going to be, and that there's ethical shifts in the industry, is important for you to know, and how that can benefit you. My advice is, don't listen to anybody. Go accept your truth, fight for your truth, but don't be blinded by your truth. Which means, if you have an idea, take it its full course. Don't just say, okay, this is my idea, now I'm going to go have a sandwich. The key when you're in the arts, if I can reduce it to something, is we've all been inspired by people who inspire us, by artists, by thinkers, by our families, as I said earlier with my grandfather. When you're in the arts, you have a responsibility, as I see it, and that responsibility is this. It's important for you to inspire in others those same feelings that your idols inspired in you. It's a big responsibility, but that's what you need to seek out and figure out a way to get to. Most of that is about defining your own route. So everybody will give you advice. Some people love you and give you advice. Some people hate you and give you advice. You have a path. Trust in it. If you accept the advice, trust the fact that you're accepting it. If you're pushing that advice away, trust in the fact you're pushing it away. But understand, the goal is to inspire in other people those feelings that your idol inspired in you. And that's a hard thing to do. And that requires study and thought and commitment and humility, but also being strong and following a path even when a lot of people might say, don't do it. You should definitely do it. Do it, do it. Wow, I sound like a Nike commercial.